With our dependencies installed, it's time to start refactoring our application, breaking things up into multiple files. And before we actually start ripping apart our app.jsx file, we're going to make a few new files that have some dummy code. We'll make sure everything works, and then we'll rip apart app.jsx. So the first step inside of index.html is going to be to rip out our script tags. I'm simply going to delete all of them. Down below, we have our one script tag, and I'm going to delete the type. We're going to default to regular JavaScript. If you don't specify the type attribute in HTML5, that's all right. It assumes it's JavaScript when it's a script tag. And instead of app.jsx, we're going to be loading in bundle.js. Whoops. And bundle.js is going to be created by Webpack. All right, that's all we have to do in index.html. Let's go ahead and make a new file in public. I'm going to call this new file app.js. And inside of app.js, all I want you to do is this. Create a function and call it greeter. Now, this greeter function is going to take no arguments, and all it's going to do is call document.write from greeter function. Then inside of app.js, we're going to call it once, and that's it. So when we have a file like this and we want to run this through Webpack, we can do this from the terminal using the Webpack command. And it takes two arguments. One, the location of your root file. In this case, should be greeter. In this case, the location is in the public folder and it's called app.js. So I'm going to specify a ./public/app.js. This is the first argument from Webpack. And the second argument is where you want to put that bundle file. We want to put it inside of the public folder, and we're going to call it bundle.js. Go ahead and hit enter, and you are done. That's all it takes to run Webpack. Now, that's not a very exciting example, but we can start the server using node server, head into the browser, visit localhost 3000, and you can see from greeter function prints to the screen. Now, this is kind of cool because we now have our bundle file, but it's still pretty useless. The next thing we're going to do is create our first separate component. This is what we're going to be doing for our real React applications. We're going to make a new folder, call it components, and inside of here we can store our individual components in their very own files. Let's go ahead and create one for our greeter component. We'll be moving it over here in the next video, but for now we can create a file called greeter.js. And inside of the greeter file, all we're going to do is move our greeter functionality by cutting and pasting it. Now, obviously, this is a very small example. The point here isn't to illustrate a practical example like this. The point is to show how you can have separate files that are able to load and use each other. Now, inside of greeter.js, we have to set module.exports equal to the thing we want other users of the file to be able to access. In this case, if someone wants to use our greeter component, all we need to give them is the greeter function, just like this. By setting module.exports equal to greeter, anybody who requires this file will get access to this function. Now over inside of app.js, instead of defining the function in line, we can load it from the separate file we just created. To do this, we're going to first create a variable, which will store the output. We're going to set it equal to require. Then inside of quotes, we're going to specify the path, which is ./components/greeter with a capital G. You can leave off the file extension in require. And with this in place, inside of the terminal, I'm going to shut down my server using Control-C, hit the up arrow key twice, which is going to let me go back through my previous commands, and rerun that Webpack command. You can also use the down arrow to go to commands before that one. All right, I'm going to hit enter, rerun Webpack, restart my server using the up arrow key twice again, head into the browser, refresh the page, and this time you can see from greeter function still prints, only this time it's in a separate file, which is really awesome. This is going to let us break out all of our code into its own file, making testing and maintaining our project easier. Now, this is a pretty simple example. This code right here is exactly the same as this. There's nothing fancy going on behind the scenes. It's simply taking the code available in module exports and injecting it right here. So with this in place, now that you understand how to load in files using require, we can move on to refactoring our actual app.jsx file. The reason I'm breaking this into separate videos is because we're not going to be able to use this simple command anymore. Running Webpack like this works when you're not using any special tools, but in this case we're using JSX and we're also using ES6 features. In order to get that to work with Webpack, we have to create a separate Webpack config file, and that is going to be the topic of the next video.